Y'all, Wizard101 just did something in the latest level 180 Darkmoor update that they've never done before, and most people don't even know about this. But, right, in the main storyline of Darkmoor, for the first time ever, the wizard is presented with a choice. However, you are more or less led to believe that this choice is irrelevant, that it doesn't matter. And yet, depending on what you choose, it does affect something big. It affects the last dialogue that you hear at the end of the Darkmoor storyline from Bartleby himself. And the implications of what we're about to talk about are extremely huge. But in order to understand why this is so huge, we have to dive very deep into the Darkmoor storyline and this choice. So obviously some spoilers ahead, but you probably could have guessed this by now. In the second to last dungeon, as in the dungeon before the Heretical Academy, you confront the new Arc 5 main villain of the game, Miranda. And her beef with Bartleby is that he's all-seeing, all-knowing, and yet bad things like the curse that basically took over Darkmoor still happen. And she essentially challenges your perspective as the scion of Bartleby, basically his champion. And she presents you with a choice. You can either choose to be loyal to the world you come from, Earth, and defy Bartleby, or choose the spiral. Now, this is obviously a very big decision because the implication is either you agree with the way Bartleby wants to do things or you don't. However, regardless of whichever door you go through in that specific dungeon, Miranda tells you the same thing, that your choice didn't matter because Bartleby had already seen that choice and had planned ahead for it. And yet, Bartleby's dialogue at the end of the world changes based on this choice. Now, before we dive into this dialogue, one thing is very important. At the end of Darkmoor, Miranda basically takes control of Sibyl's seed, which was steeped in the dreaming. Now, we learned in Wallaroo that the dreaming is the one thing that Bartleby is unaware of. It's his subconscious. It's literally what it is all the choices that he did not make, right? He uses his eye of history to see all the potential futures. He chooses the one that is, I guess, the least of all evils, and all the other ones are stored in the dreaming, and he's not aware of them, or at least to the extent that he's aware of the things that are actually happening in reality. Miranda takes control of this, so Bartleby, at the end, is not aware of anything about her. He doesn't know whether she's alive, dead, where she is. This is very important because it clues us in on what Bartleby thought would happen based on whether he thought we would choose the spiral or the earth. I know that sounds confusing, but let's take an example, right? Let's say that you chose the spiral. This is the first dialogue that you see from Bartleby. He says, "My scion, I see that Miranda Briar is no longer among the living. I know this road was a difficult one." Now, very important. This is if you choose the spiral door, meaning because he's not aware of whether Miranda, he's not aware of her whereabouts, he thought originally that if you chose the spiral door, that you would side with them and essentially kill Miranda. The first line of this dialogue, if let's say that you choose the earth, he says, "You let her go. I understand. I've had a long time to process this moment." And then he starts explaining his reasoning. This is important for two reasons. One, we now realize that Bartleby isn't as all-powerful as he's been up to this point. We no longer have control of the plot because Miranda has control of the dreaming. But what I'd argue is the bigger point is that this is low-key kind of manipulative, right? Bartleby has been essentially interacting with us this whole time, knowing what's gonna happen. He basically, this is a big difference in outcomes, right? If we choose the spiral, we would have killed her. If we chose the earth, we would have let her go. And yet he's quite tactfully trying to maneuver the situation based on what he thought was gonna happen. This really goes to show that we might have been doing a lot of things that we otherwise wouldn't have done because of Bartleby. And we now know maybe he's always thinking about what's best for the spiral, but there is some manipulation involved as a result of that. The other key piece of dialogue that I think is really cool is that he talks about omniscience, which is like, you know, basically all-seeing, all-knowing. And if you choose the spiral, he talks about how it's a burden and how it's always, you know, like you got to make some, you know, hard choices. But let's say that you choose the earth. He calls omniscience a curse. And he also explains why Sibyl had to die so you would reach Darkmoor quick, and so that you could do all the things that did end up saving some parts of Darkmoor, like in the Mortal Plains. Now, I really like this dialogue. One thing that I just love is that the implication is that Bartleby isn't as passive of a person or an entity as we thought, right? If everything went his way, we would have killed Miranda, versus what's happening now is that she's like loose in the spiral. That's already kind of crazy. He has some fairly sloppy solutions in the interest of, like, I guess choosing the lesser of two evils. That's already a thing. But the other implication, which I think is just bigger, huger, is the fact that now finally we actually have a branch storyline in the game for the first time ever. And it's obviously started very, very small, but we've already seen Bartleby depicted as a very, very different person based on the choices that we made. And I don't really see a world where Bartleby knew the entire time that we were going to choose the Earth versus knowing the entire time that we were going to choose the spiral, and that doesn't affect things down the road. In my opinion, what this means is, in the future, I think the storyline will also change based on this decision. This is like a nexus moment almost for choosing a different storyline, and it's already started having effect. I think what might happen in the next world is that, I'm not saying the whole world is going to be different. They can't make two worlds based on one choice, right? But I do think there will be key moments that are affected by this, right? Whether we're loyal to Earth, whether we're loyal to the spiral. I do want to make a whole video about Miranda, her motives, how powerful she is based on everything that we know, but we do have one hint about what's incoming in the future. They really don't flesh this out, but there's a part of the Skolomance, which is the final area of Darkmoor, where you can actually access her notes from the very past after she got into the spiral. According to her notes, Earth is a mess, maybe in its death throes, and she says that the kid, which is basically the wizard, he doesn't really care, or she doesn't really care because they're a kid, but adults have to make the harder decision. And the next bit of her notes, it kind of paints her like a scientist that detected an energy wave, presumably whatever brought us into the spiral from Earth, and she followed it. And she talks about the spiral being a convoluted mess of ley lines and rocks. And to me, what all of this suggests is that Earth is going through whatever the Earth version of Earth is in the spiral, or it's going through probably what you would expect, right? Maybe an end of world catastrophe, an energy crisis. I feel like energy seems to be something that, like, you know, she actually like knows about. I think her plan is to somehow use the ley lines or whatever other energy she can access in the spiral to save the Earth. And I think much foreboded by this choice we made that didn't seem as relevant, I think the wizard will be a more active participant in that. I think what we pick will make something happen for the Earth or the spiral that's different based on that choice. I think that's really exciting, because I don't think we've ever seen that before, where, you know, you can actually play the game a couple of times and have a very different outcome. And while they've started small with dialogue, I do think that this is their way of telling us that there will be more choices in the future. And why is that possible now? Because Bartleby simply cannot account for every possibility and guide us down one path, right? If Bartleby can't see everything, then there are officially multiple paths. There is officially free will compared to all the other arcs before. If they are gonna take the storyline seriously, that does mean there are more choices down the road. And I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. One thing that I always have a problem with when it comes to games that are based on making choices is that they give you the illusion of choice. However, very rarely does it actually end up mattering. And I hope the Wiz doesn't fall into the trap. Well, obviously there's gonna be limitations to making your choices matter. Like, when I said they can't make two worlds, I don't think they can make it so that if you chose the Earth, you have a totally different update in a year compared to someone else, right? But what I do hope is that it matters enough to make it feel like, you know, the wizard is either loyal to the Earth or loyal to the spiral based on everything that's happened up to this point. That's gonna be a hard thing to, like, you know, strike, but I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on how y'all would like to see this choice matter going forward, and whether y'all agree that this is a huge thing for the way Wiz is about to be written, the way the storyline's about to operate going forward. Either way, I think it's definitely really cool that Bartleby has different lines based on something as small as going through one door or another. I'm like, I never thought they would do something like that, even as small as it is. But yeah, y'all, let me know y'all's thoughts on this. Hopefully, if y'all didn't know about it, I think this is easily one of the coolest parts of the storyline, so hopefully you know about it now. I look forward to reading all of y'all's thoughts in the comments. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub review, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome, y'all. See y'all soon. And yeah.